So, hello everyone. My name is Fyer-Huné with Fire for Films, and this is David Sime, which I can't even explain how excited I am to get to know, because he is a augmented and virtual reality producer, which I haven't got a clue what it is. So I'm going to learn so much. Around and a public speaker. So, wow, this is a huge list that I am super excited, and I'm going to let you take over. So, introduce yourself.
Okay. My name is David. My background was originally in marketing and visual communication. I ended up moving into digital marketing about 15 years ago. People's attention spans, the thing about digital marketing is you learn a lot about what people are doing online. You can see how long they're attending to your information, and their attention spans were dropping remarkably fast. So I ended up moving into video marketing, because if a picture speaks 1,000 words, then a video speaks 1,000,000, and that worked very, very well. But then people's attention spans continued to diminish, and I thought, well, what's next? Historically, what do people do next when they've got bored of reading things and watching things and being passive? And that's to be active and to be immersed. And I thought, well, what technology can do that? And at this point, it was the still quite rudimentary early stages of virtual and augmented reality. And I moved into that, and it's been a wonderful, wonderful place to be in, because it just constantly changes. And I have a ridiculously short attention span, so this is the only industry that I've ever been in that's held my attention, because it's constantly moving. And also, it's possibly one of the most collaborative and friendly industries that I've ever been in, because there are no experts. It moves too fast. Everybody knows what they don't know, so everybody works together. There's no time to reinvent wheels. If somebody asks you for something that you can't do, rather than try to build it from scratch, you just look around for somebody else who can already do it. So it's the industry is replete with wonderful collaborations between the most incredible people, artists, sculptors, animators, writers, screenwriters, technicians, you name it, because all of these things are required, because what you're creating is a three-dimensional animated spatial environment. So it's just, I've met so many wonderful people through this. It's the best industry to be in.
It's so exciting. Like you said, it's something that you hear, but you don't see much. Like, people go, "Oh yeah, I've got some VR glasses," which they got probably from Argos. But when then I've seen you do, do you know what I mean? And then, but I've seen, like, I saw you post something about this trainer that you were like, "This is completely digital," and it looks so real. I could almost touch it, and it blew my mind. Blew my mind. So, how did you get into it? That, oh no, you got into that. But how did you know that you wanted to go into it? Like, how did you go, okay, I'm going to go virtual reality? Like, how did that come across?
I kind of stumbled into it. I knew that people would require immersion. I knew the way that things, I didn't know, but I suspected that the technology was going to get cheaper. It was going to get more ubiquitous. I'd looked at the way that they were developing mobile phones. I'd looked at, the fact that you could slam your mobile phone into a Google Cardboard and have virtual reality. I'd done some work with Google on that. I really just in their training capacity. There's this thing called the digital garage that they use for training people in the future of digital marketing and how you can use it for yourself and your business and that kind of thing. So I'd looked into it. How I was going to do it, I had no idea, because I didn't have any real background knowledge. I knew about tech, I knew about digital marketing, but these are very different things. I had a producer, a guy called David Brown, who was creating my visual content, my video content, and he was doing a very good job. And he did a little film, a little independent film, and it was completely unfunded. And he needed a bunch of his kind of Victoriana style, a kind of steampunk thing. So he needed a bunch of people with the right look for it. So he just called everybody he knew with a beard. And I got called to be an extra in this thing, right? It subsequently won a BAFTA, by the way. So just one of these guys that he doesn't mess around, right? And the whole thing was done on a shoestring. Anyway, I got sitting down to this interesting guy who had a beard. And he said, "What is it you do?" And I told him. And I asked him what he did. And he said, "I'm just finishing off a degree." He's in his 50s. "I'm just finishing off a degree in virtual reality building." And I was like, "Oh, fascinating. Can you show me?" So he brings out his phone and he shows me just a video, and it's a video of somebody's perspective walking down a cobbled street, and then they go into the video goes into a room up a spiral staircase into a living room. There's a fire in the hearth and there's an oil lamp on the table. And I said, "This is great, but when are you going to show me the virtual reality?" And he said, "That is the virtual reality." I couldn't tell. I just couldn't tell. And on the spot, I just said to him, "Do you want a job?" And ever since then, we just, oh yeah, literally offered him a job straight away, and he became part of an organisation which went from being Encore Video, online corporate video production limited, to being Encore Reality, and he's still my head of VFX, and that's where it started. So that's the story of how I got into it. I stumbled into it, as I do in so many things.
That's amazing. You literally stumbled in. And so going back to, is your company called Encore then? Is that your own virtual reality company?
Yes, so I've got I've got Encore Video, who do video production for companies, and that's very much targeted video analysis, that kind of thing. It's basically advertising online. And I've got Encore Reality, which creates virtual reality and augmented reality, mostly business to business. Mostly it's the large organizations that have very deep pockets. They have a lot to spend, but they have a lot to gain. So the likes of the oil and gas industry, for instance, are tightening their belts because they're kind of in decline. They're winding down, and they don't want to have to send people to oil platforms to check out, I don't know, a new construction or a leaky gas main or whatever, because it's very expensive. They need to insure them with something called the NABOSH offshore certification, which is one of those ones where you have to go inside a helicopter and they submerge it in a swimming pool and you've got to escape from it. This stuff's really expensive. The insurance is really expensive, and they're having to fly like 15 people from around the world just to visit this one thing. With virtual reality, we can scan the thing, we can send a live model of it to anybody with a headset, so they can still be in their office in Singapore and Australia and you name it, and they can all be right there live on that oil platform without having had to leave their office, and that saves them a lot of money. Simultaneously, we'll use the same technology for the renewable energy industry, who they've got money, they're not worried about that. But what they don't want to do is waste carbon. They don't want to waste fuel emissions flying people all over the world to see a wind farm. The whole purpose is to reduce carbon outputs, right? So they'll use exactly the same technology, not to save money, but to save carbon. But we also use this technology for renewable energy, housing. So we will fly drones above housing estates. We capture hundreds of thousands of photographs, and then we use very sophisticated technology to bring all that together to create 3D models, because it just looks at all the photos and goes, all right, okay, I get the shape of this. And then what we have is we have a detailed model of an entire housing estate, which we can then use to work out if we were to put solar panels on those roofs with the angle, orientation, longitude, latitude, shading from nearby trees, etc., what would be the exact amount of power that would be generated by this, and therefore how much money would it save, and therefore how much of the return on investment could the company get. And that way we can motivate people who really give zero craps about the environment. We can motivate them through finance to do something which is good for the environment, because they see how they can get the return on investment. So that kind of stuff.
Wow. Okay, you're basically saving the world.
Well, I don't like to blow my own trumpet, but yes.
Because that is what you're doing, is you're using media technology to make a difference. I mean, I thought a film made a difference, but you're actually making something that is going to, like, obviously companies are thinking of the money, but there's deeper things. That's incredible. And to know that something can do that. Wow. That's crazy. It's almost like Black Mirror. Do you know?
Absolutely.
Oh my God.
I tend to find it's easier to lead people by their motivations into doing the right thing. And usually with a corporation, I remember reading an Ian Banks book years ago. It was dealt with different dimensions, and in different dimensions, they were different things that come to pass. And the bad ones, the selfish dimensions, were the ones where shareholder capital had become the way that businesses grew and developed. Because the thing is, if a company is motivated purely by profit, i.e., paying dividends and increasing the investment value to shareholders, those shareholders tend to be distanced by a couple of removes from the actual activities which make this profit. So, for instance, if you had an oil and gas company and they had two choices, one of them is we need to put a pipeline across Alaska to get fuel across there, as we've seen in America. We have two choices. We can either bury it under the ground or have it above the ground. If we have it above the ground, it's going to disrupt caribou migratory pathways and therefore result in the extinction of entire species. If we bury it below the ground, it won't do that, but it will cost more. A human being would bury it below the ground. A corporation would go the cheap route.
Yeah. Yes.
None of the human beings concerned know anything about the caribou. They just know that they put a bunch of their money in and they want to get the maximum amount out. And if they don't, they're going to take their money elsewhere. Therein lies the problem. So if you need to make something good happen, you need to find a way to make it profitable. And fortunately, we've stumbled across a way to make it profitable, or at least save them money.
Well, I know the business I need to join. I am in the wrong business. This is. Do you think that? Because obviously, me being like early 20s, I feel like I should know more about this, but I don't. Do you think it's well known, or do you think that it needs? Or do you think it's not as well known? Like, is there anything that needs pushing? Do you think?
It's not that well known. Virtual reality has been around since the late 70s, the late 1970s, and it hasn't really changed that much since then. It's only in the weight and the cost of the hardware and the resolution and the realism of the environments within virtual reality. It's come and gone, because what happens is as soon as it starts to get any kind of momentum, the media, creative media, gets their hands on it and go, oh, it's going to be amazing. And we call it the Lawnmower Man effect. In the early 1990s, there was a film called The Lawnmower Man, which took place in virtual reality. But it gave everybody a false expectation of what was possible. So everybody wanted it, but then they tried it, the real thing, and went, well, this is a bit disappointing. And it disappeared. And this has happened several times in the life cycle of virtual reality. As a result, it hasn't ever taken hold, even since the 1970s. So we're now on the cusp of it being able to do everything that it could possibly do. I literally just got off the phone to a guy from a company called Varjo, who are based in Helsinki in Finland, and they've got a headset which you cannot tell the difference between what's real and what isn't. It's amazing. It knows where you're looking. You can control stuff just by looking at it. It knows where your pupils are. It can bring stuff up in front of you, like at the moment a Volvo car will appear in front of you, and it will look so much like the real thing. You can't tell the difference between it and the real world around it. And then it can bring in another real world around it. So instead of being in a studio, suddenly you're in a Sicilian cobbled street. And again, it's so real, you feel like you're there, which is amazing, but this stuff's still quite expensive. However, there are now headsets that you can buy for about 200 quid, an Oculus Go it's called, or an Oculus Quest was about 400 quid. What will do practically to your layperson, and even me, you can barely tell the difference. This is now within the realms of what people can afford. The other thing that's really going to change the world, however, isn't virtual reality, or what it's doing is it's placing you in an entirely virtual world where you can't see anything that's real. It's all digital. And augmented reality is different. You're seeing the real world and it's just overlaying a little bit of digital. And that means with wearables, which is instead of looking through your mobile phone, which is how it currently works, you are putting on a pair of glasses and the display is there. That means that anyone can use it anywhere, anytime. So instead of us looking down at our mobile phones, which is where the phrase Black Mirror came from, staring into
No way!
Really? Yep.
Wow. Sorry.
I know.
Sorry.
I know, it's cool, isn't it? I think it was predicted by one of these, early, like, I don't know, Nostradamus or whatever, predicted that at a certain point the entirety of humanity would be staring like Narcissus into the pond, into these black mirrors, walking around with these little black mirrors, and it came to pass with our mobile phones. Anyway, instead of having this weird binary existence where you're either looking into Facebook and that's it, you're there, your attention is there, or you're in the real world looking at the real world, it will be mixed. It'll be constantly mixed, and we'll all have our own unique filters, so that some of us will be more interested in art. And so we'll maybe, as we're walking down the street, we'll see all sorts of amazing animated or otherwise artwork which has been created by local artists or graffiti artists or whatever, but nobody else is seeing it, just you and other people with that filter on. Other people might be interested in shopping and sales and so forth, and that they'll just see where the sales are and where they can buy the thing that they're looking to buy. Some people will be interested in professional stuff, a bit like LinkedIn, where everybody that they see will have a little bit of information about them. I am a stockbroker. I work for this company and I've been doing it for this amount of time. So there's so many filters, and we'll all have these unique filters. But the main thing is it will be constant. So imagine this from the perspective of an advertiser. Currently, they have to pay several £1,000s a month just to get an advert on a billboard, right? Mm-hmm. Now, digital billboards are brilliant because you can say, well, I only want my advert to be there between 8 a.m. and 9 a.m. in the morning because I want to get people commuting to work. And then exactly. So I'll sell them the kind of products that would be relevant to that commuter. Meanwhile, the daytime audience, who might be a bit older or whatever, the billboard will have, I don't know, pension plan adverts and that kind of thing on there. This will be different because instead of paying that money to be on that billboard, you can place your advertising anywhere. And not only can anybody who sees it, the scale is unlimited, the cost is infinitesimal, but the advertiser knows who has looked at their advert, when, what they did next, how much they spent, and therefore did that make them a return on investment, or do they want to have the advert elsewhere? Simultaneously, your graffiti artists and your installation artists can now place their artwork anywhere without getting arrested. And only the people who want to see it get to see it. You see, this is what's really going to change things. And the problem has been that the only headsets that we had, there was a thing called the Magic Leap, which got massive amount of investment. Like, we're talking billions of pounds of investment from everybody, from Google to you name it. But it didn't do that well because this thing looked ridiculous. It was just
like a humongous thing that no one could even walk around in. And you're saying that people need to wear these every day? Yes. I mean, I was just picking an outfit, never mind a headwear.
Exactly. And the problem is you've got to get a lot of processing power inside this thing, right? So it's going to be heavy and it's going to be bulky. But then, this is hilarious, somebody who was an engineer for Magic Leap with all this money being invested, worked for them for a little while, and then he left, and then he went off to Beijing, where it's really hard to enforce intellectual property because, China, ex-communist country, the idea of property ownership is an anathema to them. So the idea of owning an idea is ridiculous to them, So as a result, there's not much in the way of intellectual property protection in China. And so he went back to his hometown, Beijing, and came out with something even better. And that thing was called an Unreal headset. By the way, I'm not getting paid by these guys. I'm just excited by this technology.
Yeah.
Well, these things look like a pair of Ray-Bans. They just look like a pair of glasses. And there's a wee cable, and it attaches to your phone. And that does the processing. So you're not wearing it on your head. It just looks like a pair of glasses. You can walk down the street wearing them, almost like a pair of glasses. But that's where things are going, is that using the technology that we've already paid for, our mobile phones, and then attaching it to something that we can wear and allowing us to be constantly half in and half out of this virtual world. So instead of this either looking at a phone or not, we'll have this kind of constant digital augmentation going on, and that is going to change things dramatically. Add to that 5G, which means that instead of whether or not it's melting our heads or giving us viruses or whatever,
so that stuff. But I'm like, well, this coronavirus, anything can happen. So you were saying that, so.
I love a good conspiracy theory, I really do. But honestly, the frequency that this operates at, from what I've researched into, it doesn't look as if it's harmful radiation at all. But anyway, I could be wrong. Who knows? But at the moment, if it's not melting our brains, it does allow us to send a vast amount of information backwards and forwards to our phones, which means that we don't have to store it on the phones, which brings us to the next innovation, and that is augmented reality like QR codes before it in the UK. We're spoiled by the fact that every time you wanted to use it, you kind of had to download another app. Who can be bothered, right? What we want to do is we want to use something called browser-based augmented reality. That means that you don't have to download anything. You just click a link, or you're on a website, or you're in a certain location, and it just gets it off the internet, just like a web page. And all this cool stuff, like, I don't know, the shoes that you saw there, that were indistinguishable from reality. We created something just as a demo for Canon, the printer people, recently, and it's just photorealistic printer that you can just have appear on your desk and see what it would look like, see whether it would fit. Yeah, and that's where they are.
Hey.
Yeah, no downloads, no nothing. I'll send you a link afterwards so that people can have a wee play with it. But yeah, you just click a link and bam, there it is. And also the cool thing about it is another thing called occlusion, which means that usually it breaks the illusion with augmented reality. If you put your hand in front of an object that's seemingly distant, it can't tell how far away it is. So that object is here. In front of the hand. It breaks the whole illusion of scale and everything. Occlusion allows the phone to recognize, or the device to recognize, this thing's far away, this thing's near, so this thing should therefore be behind this other thing. And that's a total game changer, because it gives you the sense of scale and realism. It's quite difficult to achieve, but they've nailed it. So every week I go, oh, this is a real problem for me, and then I go to the tech people and they say, oh, we've solved that problem. So it's fantastic.
It's crazy to know that. I mean, all the stuff you've told me, I'm not even joking yet. I feel like my whole brain is going, you don't know anything, Fyer. There's so much more you need to learn, because this stuff is incredible, and it's even more incredible that every day is changing. And you see that firsthand. How is that for you? Do you ever sometimes need to sit down and have a rest?
No. What you described, that whole you don't know anything by, that's how I feel every morning. So it keeps me at the top of my game. But funnily enough, that guy that I mentioned, my head of VFX, Stephen, he's like in his 50s, but he has the mind of like an early 20-year-old, because he's constantly learning new things. How you stay young is constantly learn new things, right? As soon as you set into a rut or a pattern, that's when you age. So I love this, because it's keeping my brain young, it's keeping my neuroplasticity up. You never get to rest, sure enough. Sometimes you want to just, have a break from it, but it's so interesting. I never get sick of learning it,
Yeah, who wants to go to bed when you can find out all this stuff, and then to know that everything is possible. Like, if someone gave you a random idea, I bet you'd be like, yeah, I could do that. Give us 2 weeks and I'll make that. Like, because you can. It's just...
Yeah, even if I have no idea how it could be achieved, I'll just say yes, and usually a couple of days later, it can be done. So,
wow, your brain is... I'd love to be in one day like you, David. Honestly, go to you and just be you and just do all that, because that sounds incredible. So incredible. Those things. You're gonna go home now with the biggest head, like, oh yes.
Yeah. No, I mean the problem is migraines, to be honest with you, because if you're constantly bombarded with information, your brain starts to hurt. But again, it's work.
So I was just going to ask you, basically, the two questions, but I think you've answered them. What are your best parts of your journey and what you do, and what are your main hurdles? But what are they? But I mean, I kind of feel like I've heard them, but tell us again. What would be
the best part is always the best parts, the people. The technology is amazing. The people are even better, because you meet people who are, like I said before, you'll meet sculptors, you'll meet animators, you'll meet marketing statisticians, you'll meet ecologists, economists. Everybody's got their own specialism, their background, the thing that led them to have a passion in whatever discipline it is. And because this sits squarely at the middle of so many disciplines, I get to meet all these fascinating people. And the more fascinating people you're around, the more it kind of has an impact on the way you think of things, you know. And that's the real nourishing thing about this whole thing. And also, obviously, because we're in a virtual environment, this whole COVID lockdown thing is really not so much of an issue for people in our discipline, because we meet virtually most of the time anyway. It's barely affected me. It's just made me busier.
Oh my God. Now you've answered another question of mine, because I was going to say how you kept through COVID, but I didn't even think about that. You do everything virtual anyway, so for you, this is just like every day. Just probably can't go to Tesco as much.
Well, there are limitations, and actually, that was an interesting one, because we were asking what are the main hurdles, right? The main hurdles are there is some technology which isn't quite ready. It's getting ready bloody rapidly, but it's not quite ready for the situation that we're in. I'll give you an example. I was asked about a month ago by a conferencing company, oh yeah, we just want to do a small, because all the conferences got cancelled, right? And this is a seriously big deal for them. A lot of money changes hands for these things, millions. And they've got teams to support. So they said, can you do this virtually? And I said, yeah, okay, what kind of size are you wanting? And they said, oh, just something small, just 1,400 people. And I kind of paused, and they said, is that going to be a problem? And I was like, well, the maximum number of people that you can get in a virtual room all talking to each other is a bit lower than that. And I said, well, how much lower? And I said, 90 tops.
To be honest, not for 4 people on Zoom or anything, because everyone's talking, everyone's stopping and glitching. So, wow, they were asking a lot.
Yes. Well, what they see is, like, some of them will play like massive multiplayer online games, Grand Theft Auto or World of Warcraft or whatever, and they think, well, you can have limitless people in there. But the thing is, there's a big difference between seeing people flitting around and being able to talk to them. Because as soon as you want to talk to them, you're having to send packets of much more detailed information than just location and what the avatar looks like. You're having to send everything, all the vocals and tonality and distance and all this kind of stuff, which we probably in the past used things like VoIP, voice over internet protocol, which we use for the likes of cheap phones and that kind of thing. And it's always been a bit ropey, and it takes a lot of data, and that's the real problem. There's probably going to be people out there that will be screaming at me, no, that's not the real problem, there's lots of other problems, but that's the one that I'm aware of, right? And so the one that I'm talking about that can do 90 people, that's Microsoft's one. That's one called Space. And so imagine you've got the whole backing of Microsoft, which has been vast and tons of money since forever, and invented Skype, and they can't get more than 90 people in there. That's going to be a problem. The other
now as well, because everyone wants this, don't they? Everyone's like, I need virtual. So yeah, that is actually, I didn't think that was a problem, but now it feels like a problem.
It's a and they're working on it. They are working on it, and there are workarounds. But the other problem is, if you want this thing to work in your computer, I don't know if you've ever worked in one of these big corporate environments where you've got an IT department and they'll stop you from downloading certain stuff, and you can't use Google, you have to use Bing, etc., etc. Well, imagine you have to download a thing that allows you to do virtual reality, calls. You're going to get blocked, you're going to get firewall issues, etc., etc. And these are the people who mostly need to use this stuff from big corporations. So I have been looking around desperately trying to find solutions that don't involve downloads, that won't trigger these firewalls, that won't create problems and friction points, because most of us aren't really that I'm not that technical, not really. I just want the stuff to work, and I find it cool, but I'm not like a tech, who goes, ooh, it's no problem. I just have to do these 15 things in sequence. That's easy. I get muddled after 2, right? And I just assume everybody else does. So I design for me, i.e. an idiot, and then everybody else can handle it if I can handle it. And the problem is that these things are complicated to use and they're not that good yet. So what I did as a solution, because it's all changing so rapidly and there's so many platforms appearing and they're all developing rapidly, was I created a kind of a spreadsheet, an online spreadsheet using Google Sheets, and I got everybody involved, from AltSpace to Mozilla Hubs, which doesn't require a download but just a bit basic, to Glue, to whatever, you name it. And it's got this list of about 100 questions saying, can you do this? What do you have to do to download it? Can you bring a 3D object in there and manipulate it? How many people can be in the place at the same time? And allow them to answer their own questions so that people like me can do comparisons between them at any given point. And then I'm bringing other people like me in to verify that their claims are correct. So over the last week, I pulled together a team of about 50 specialists, just folk I know on LinkedIn, right? And they're all looking at this sheet and just comparing them to see if we can find the perfect solution or the best solution for whatever the challenge is, whether that be a conference, whether that be an engineering company that wants to work in a component together with just a couple of people, whether that be a nursery that just wants to bring a bunch of kids into an environment where they can play together, you know, that kind of thing. There's going to be a solution for each of them. So anyway, that's the hurdle, and that was my solution. We'll see how it goes.
Well, I'm going to be honest. You definitely answered how you got over that, and you definitely did. It just sounds like you just know absolutely bloody everything. I just love it. That's how you do it in like a really ignorant way. You just go, no, what I do is I just research what I need to do it, see if there's a problem, and get over it. It sounds like you have a hurdle and you always get over it because you have to, and that's what you do. And it sounds like this isn't even a hurdle anymore for you, is it?
Hopefully not. I mean, it seems not. But again, what does this come down to? It comes down to people, right? It comes down to, you know, I don't consider myself to be an expert. The only thing that I seem to be kind of good at is bringing people together who are experts and having them solve problems together, you know. And so find the problem, find the people who can solve it, bring them together, let them solve it, and then everybody's happy. And I just get to watch the geniuses do their cool stuff. And that makes me very happy. I was just saying to my wife earlier on that I am the happiest person in his job in the world, because this is exactly what I enjoy doing. You know, I get to play with cool toys, hang out with cool people, solve problems for people, and you know, soak up all the credit.
Oh my god, it just sounds brilliant. Like, wow. Oh my gosh. I meant to be gobsmacked. And when you were saying the happiest person, you don't hear that much, you know? And that's brilliant. That is just so good to hear that you love that, because people should always love their jobs, even if they don't like it. You've got to love something, haven't they?
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to ask you about you being a writer as well. What do you write?
Well, I run a few companies, as I mentioned, and I've had health problems in my life. I've got Crohn's disease, and you know, that's incapacitated me for work in the past. The annoying thing is it doesn't incapacitate your brain, just your body. So you end up, you know, stuck in this kind of, you know, prison, which is part of the reason that I wanted to, you know, help develop things with augmented and virtual reality, because it removes that barrier of distance, you know. And I do a lot of teaching and training and that kind of thing, but I've always had a kind of a background interest in healthcare. And so I started by being asked to talk about the application of virtual and augmented reality in healthcare. One of the things was I have a friend who's called Suzanne Lee, and she's a very talented technical innovator from a banking group. And she just kind of chucked it all and went, right, I had to look after I think it was her mum, had dementia. And her mum eventually dies, and she really felt that there must have been a better way to look after her with all the various challenges with this. And she thought, I wonder if virtual reality would be that solution. With no real background in it, she just went and learned, right? And now she's literally just a few years later, this woman's my inspiration. Just a few years later, she's one of the foremost innovators and researchers in this field, and she created this whole virtual reality solution. So when I was asked by an international journal to write something about healthcare and virtual reality, that's what I wrote about. I did a kind of a white paper kind of academic study thing into that and the use of augmented virtual reality to help people with the autism and Asperger's syndrome, because some of the challenges are similar, to place them in safe environments which are tailored to their strengths and their weaknesses and challenges to you know, help them to adapt and overcome. So with dementia, that kind of thing, what had been noticed was that depth perception was an issue, so we would compensate for that. Memory obviously is an issue. Making decisions can be an issue, so restricting the amount of decisions in the decision tree, restricting the amount of routes, taking people back to this kind of golden era of roughly when they're about between 15 and 25 years old, seems to not only have a beneficial effect on them mentally but also physically. It's almost like it reminds the body what it was like to be that age. And people with dementia tend to have really good memories of when they were much younger, but not so much of recent times. Yeah,
that's when they go child's form. They go a bit more like they'll remember stuff from years and years and years ago, but can't. Yeah. Oh my god.
you place them in the environment, right? So it's familiar, and yeah, and it's so good for them, because even when you take them out, they're still kind of there, and their brains are young again for a while. Their bodies, their stamina goes up and everything. It's crazy. And they actually communicate with each other in care homes and places like that, where previously they wouldn't have, because they've got the shared experience, and now, of course, we can. Yeah, it's great. I mean, they've been doing it with music for years. There's a thing in Scotland called the Soundtrack for Life, where they just find the tunes that were popular, at that age group and that time, and it just seems to trigger all these memories. Well, we're doing this, as Suzanne's doing this, with the visual immersive experience. They're not just hearing it, they're seeing it, they're there. And then with autism and Asperger's syndrome, which is kind of what some people refer to as higher functioning autism, where it's easier for folk to do stuff that everybody else does, but it's still a struggle. And I've got friends and family members who have Asperger's syndrome. What comforts them is routine and foreknowledge, and they can be overwhelmed because they're filters that we can filter stuff out dead easily for the most part, us neurotypical people, but they struggle a wee bit more with that. So they tend to gravitate towards the familiar. Because they've already worked out how to, filter that. So a friend of mine in Australia, a guy called Craig Hendry, who's actually from Scotland and moved there, he had encountered this, that people who had Asperger's syndrome couldn't go to busy theme parks and exhibitions and that kind of thing, because all the people there, the noises, the smells, it was too much. Yeah. So what he said was, well, I can scan this with this device that we use. It's kind of a low-grade virtual reality scanner called a Matterport. And you can create these 360 walkthroughs, but there's no sound, there's no people, just the environment. So they can go and try it out and see it, which is great in itself, but it also familiarizes them with the environment, right? So that's level one. Then what you can do is add in sounds, the sounds of people, going around you. So that's level two. But if it's too much for them at any point, they just take off the headset, that's fine. They can get out, right? It's good for agoraphobia in this reason as well. So by the time they actually physically go to the place, they're already familiar with it. So it doesn't overwhelm them. They can actually go to places that previously would have been way too much because they know it, they feel it, they've been there. So it takes away these travel restrictions. Anyway, this brings me back to what I wrote about. I wrote about that. And then and then there was this journal that a friend of mine, I did a presentation at Glasgow University down the road, and the guy who's the head of it is a guy called Paul Brown. He is their head of he's a professor of surgery, I think it is, and he's very interested in new technology and particularly for training surgery, working with virtual reality and what we call haptics, which is force feedback, where you're using a thing that looks like a scalpel attached to a tiny robotic arm, so that when you're in virtual reality and you're using your scalpel, you can feel it, hit bone, or you can feel the pulse of the heart, everything, and you don't have to bring in a dead body or a cadaver. Fascinating stuff. You really don't want to get these guys around a table and have a meal with them, as I did, because they'll put you off immediately talking about, oh yeah, do you remember that time we were importing a body from America and we lost it? That kind of. Anyway, he asked me. He happened to be editing like his fifth journal or something like that. He's a really prodigious writer, and he said, would you like to do a chapter in the first edition of a book which I'm authoring, which is called Biomedical Visualization? And I wanted to write about the use of virtual reality for people who have had amputations or who have been born without limbs, because they train them up to use what are called smart prosthetics. So a prosthetic is prosthetic limb, it's a fake limb, right? A smart prosthetic is a powered one which can pick up on your nerve impulses from, that we would use, but have nowhere to go. So it picks up on them and then it feeds them down this, effectively it's a robot arm, right? And it knows what to do. The thing is, you got to train people to use it. Let's say they had their arm amputated, or they lost an arm in an accident or war injury or something like that, and it was like 10 years ago. Remembering how to use your hand after that period, particularly when there's no nerve feedback, you know how hard it is when you get pins and needles and you try to pick up something. Imagine that constantly, right? So it's difficult. And the training that we had for this was really rubbish. It was like they would attach this thing to this stump, for want of better words, and say, okay, send an impulse and we'll see if it can. It's like that game Flappy Bird. We'll see if we can get the bird to move up with each impulse. Really difficult.
How can someone know what an impulse is if you've never had an impulse? Mainly, if someone was born with no stump, how would they ever know how to move that stump? Do you know what I mean? So if they go, that's weird. Yeah, that must be so hard.
You've nailed it. You've nailed it. That's exactly it. Congenital amputees, they call them, even though nothing's been amputated, but they've been born with a limb, thalidomide, or whatever other reason, right? And yeah, they have no memory of it. So how are they supposed to do it? Well, what this genius, I forget his name, but I'll send you the link. I did a video on it as well. And it's a really clever guy in I think it was Bristol University, and he's from Ireland. And Ivan somebody, and he worked out a way to use something called a myoband, which is a consumer product, right? You can buy them quite cheaply, and it just picks up the myofascial neural impulses. So basically, myofascia is this weird stuff that looks like cling film that holds our muscles together, right? But it transmits nerve impulses as well as a default. Anyway, long story short, he worked out how to attach this to another thing, which is oh god, I can't remember what it's called, but basically it's just a scanning device which sees where you are and everything and then transmits this into virtual reality. So that instead of saying to the person, send an impulse to your arm, it shows you with an arm. So suddenly this person's looking down and they've got an arm and a hand, right?
Oh
And then he just says to them, yeah, and he just says to them, pick up an apple. There's an apple, pick it up. And you know what? The brain somehow knows. It's like it's hardwired to know. And the hand goes out and picks up the apple. I'm wildly oversimplifying this, but
Yeah.
and it doesn't always work that well. But that's what we're getting at, is that it's a more naturalistic way of learning whether or not you can actually operate this thing, this limb. These things are really expensive. The NHS don't just hand them out willy-nilly. So this proves that they can use it, but it also trains them to use it. Now, this technology already existed. What I wanted to know was, can we use the same technology to train the implant to learn the unique nerve impulses of the person? So the person's learning to use the arm's learning to use the person. And as it turns out, yes, the two pieces of technology were being used with virtual reality, but they weren't being brought together. So that was what I wrote my study on. And this stuff's all very dry academic stuff, to be honest with you, although I find it very interesting. I also write for magazines on the cooler stuff, you know, and you know, various kind of journals and stuff. I want to get into sci-fi, but it's not sci-fi anymore. It's literally just be writing about the day job, you know.
Don't ever say that it's boring, because it's not. I don't think it's boring. It's not boring. Nothing's boring, because everyone's got an interest in something. And what you've just been saying has not bored me at all. And most people will be like, oh, as a girl, a young girl, you probably find it boring. I don't. You'll change your lives. What's bloody boring about that?
True. Well, we do our best. But like I say, there's these people are already out there. There's people all over the world doing these incredible things with this technology, and people that have got like a specific thing that they're devoting their lives to fixing. And I'm just lucky enough that I get to meet these people periodically, introduce them to each other, but just learn about them, learn about their stories, and that's what that's what makes this stuff fun. And if I can let other people know what's happening. In some cases, let them know that there's a technological light at the end of the tunnel for the issue that they've got, whether that be business or health or psychology. Then that's rewarding in itself. So it's just yet another reason why it's such a brilliant industry to be in.
It really is. Oh my God. I have so much more questions to ask you, and I'm going to go on a work meeting in a minute. So we'll end on a high of, what advice would you give people, young like myself, or just getting into the industry, or just completely don't know what to do, and they hear this and they're going, oh, this is really interesting. What would be your advice?
Okay. Work out what it is that you want to achieve. Work out what it is that really excites you and that you want to do with your life and your skills and your talents. And don't think technically, just think of the things that really float your boat. Yeah. And then find people who are doing it in this field. Okay. Or find people who might have a requirement for it in this field, because it's all very well for, you get somebody that's an expert in virtual reality, but they're not an expert in painting, right? But they need a painter, because they're building a virtual reality app for painting, right? So it doesn't matter what you do. You don't have to be technical. I'm not technical at all. My brother's the technical one in my family. I'm the artistic one, which means the dumb one. So you don't need to be technical. Don't be put off by that. If you do need to learn technical skills, they are out there, okay? There's all sorts of free training out there online if you just look for it, okay? And the Stack Overflow is a good place to start, but any number of other places, but ask advice from people in the field. Where did you learn? I get asked this advice all the time. Don't pay for it because you don't have to. Remember that nobody in this field is an expert. Nobody considers themselves to be an expert because it moves too fast. So never feel daunted. Never feel, oh, I'm too stupid. I don't know enough. I'll never catch up. Nobody's any more than a week ahead of you because everything changes week by week. So just dive in and ask their advice, do the training, don't be afraid, and make sure that what you're doing is motivating to you as an individual, not on a technical level, but on a personal level, because there will be a niche for you in this world, just as there is in every other field. So that would be my recommendation.
Wow, David, you do know that what I'm going to do tonight is look up virtual reality now, because I feel like I've just missed out a huge chunk of what I should have known and want to know. Like, when you think of it, I just mainly think of like Avatar or something like, just like stuff that you've really just been told about, not the stuff that it can do in real life to help. Do you know what I mean? So I am so intrigued. I'm probably going to ask you, because I have got a meeting now, but I'd love to have another interview with you.
Yeah, sure.
More stuff, because I feel like I've only just touched it. I feel like I've just, you just swam to the top, and I need to get more. Do you know what I mean? This is, you're done, but I don't feel done.
Well, listen, I would love to. I'd love to do it again. It's yeah, I love the sound of my own voice. So any opportunity.
I like your voice too, so that's even better. But David, can I just say thank you so much for your time this evening, when I know that you've been chock-a-block and you've just come straight off our call to me. So thank you so much. And
My pleasure.
until next time then, yeah?
Until next time.